Alright, so today we're going to do something a little bit different from what I usually stream and put on the channel. We're going to do like a preview for MSI and talk a bit about what happened in Spring Split for all the regions. Today we're going to do specifically Pool 1, which as you can see, this is all according to Leaguepedia. So today that's China, Korea and Europe. So we'll start with China, as this is just the order that's on Leaguepedia, might as well. We'll sort of talk about as many of the teams as possible that I sort of watched. I watched a lot of China, but didn't watch every game. So, for example, I didn't watch any TTG, didn't watch any LGD, didn't watch any... Actually, I watched one WE game, which was, I think, their first game, to see how they looked with their new roster, because they had this really, like, I think it was an LDL. I think they were all LDL from, like, in the bottom side of the map. So, I watched one game, thought they were shit, didn't watch them again. IG, I watched some of their earlier games, decided they were never going to make playoffs, didn't watch it again, and I think they're going to need to change something drastic if they want to make it to playoffs for the summer split. Don't know where you change it, because I think they're just flawed throughout. Anyone's legend, Betty is a freaking legend. If it wasn't for Betty, they wouldn't be anywhere. Wait, this is Betty. I swear, my brain just gets confused. Yeah, it is Betty's team. If it wasn't for Betty, I don't think they'd be doing as well, but I love all their players. I'm not sure, maybe they would... I don't know where you change it necessarily. I think they've got a decent team for their level, and I think they have the best chance of the teams outside of OMG who didn't make playoffs of making playoffs. But I do think, as you can sort of see in the standings, there's quite a gap between those that did make play-ins and didn't. They made playoffs and didn't make playoffs. Ultra Prime. Didn't watch many Ultra Prime games. Like, I actually rate them as a team. Like, I love watching Chelsea and Hacker, but I didn't actually watch many. So I couldn't tell you really anything about them. OMG, I mean, they're just a team with Kareem and Abel. Like, they have the same flaws that any team with Kareem had. Like, same as he had last year. He's just weak side. Isn't good enough at being a weak mid laner. Like, a supportive mid laner, maybe is the better way of saying it, a Galio type player who's going to, if you want to compete for anything internationally, he's just never going to be good enough. And so, given this is such a strong region, it's unlikely he's ever going to make playoffs unless his team is substantially better than him. FPX, you could see their inexperience in top, and I guess sort of, it wasn't necessarily inexperience. Maybe it's just inexperience as a team. Like, Cleared and Gory should have experience, LDX should have experience, but it didn't feel like it when they were playing. They were making a lot of weird mistakes. Didn't watch much RA, actually. Billy, I think, once they actually have, like, a consistent roster, consistently training, because you've got all those things with Uzi being, he came in, he had a holiday at the start, came in, then had on a holiday once they couldn't do very well they couldn't seed very well for playoffs. Like, it was a bit weird. And they are a flawed team. Like, I don't think, maybe ignoring Doggo, Uzi, I don't see many of them finishing top 2 in China, but maybe that's just my deluded opinion because I haven't watched enough Fofo. Breathe has never been on. He was like, when I watched him last year more, he was a flawed player, but he was flawed in the 1v1 in the top lane, and he was occasionally not sharp as well as he should do, or as he'd be expected to do in a team fight, given how poorly he did in the 1v1. And then, and he was just inconsistent. He's a good player though. I do rate him, and I do think he can do something. EDG, what the fuck was their drop off? Flandre went from being one of the best top lanes in the world to just being doo-doo. JJ was not special. Scout, he had good games. He definitely had good games, but he also had less good games. Viper had less good games. And Mako occasionally just inted his face off or whatever. Weibo is the team with the shy on. Like, literally, there's always just going to be the drawback of having the shy, where he either runs it down or he wins a game. He did play. He had like 4 games in a row where he was really, really good. Like, you can tell just from IO dominates like clickbait. Like they had like, sorry, his titles. I'm not going to call it clickbait. It wasn't really clickbait. Where he was playing one of the best top laners in China, and then the next like after those four series, he then has just the worst game of his life, and it's just a team with a shy on. Yeah, didn't watch them in playoffs though, so I don't know how they actually looked in playoffs, but I watched their regular season stuff and it was just the shy. We'll do LNG before we get onto playoffs because the other four made the like lower thing, made the bit with the lower bracket, the top four. LNG, they actually looked really, really clean in the regular season. Like I really rated them regular season. And what the hell was their playoff series? They just did not turn up in every sense, whether that was like playing, drafting, whatever. Right, so now we get on to the top four teams in China. I guess we'll start with JDG. Yeah, they were a team. I don't really remember their flaws that well. It was just felt like they were always outclassed to a degree. They were good, but just outclassed. V5, it was the fucking rookie show. It was actually the rookie show. Votic played well. PP God played well in the series that they won, but he also ran it down against top both games, both series. Rich had moments, Carter had moments, and they looked really, really good. They looked decent late game, and they definitely had the least issues of the top three teams in China, but they also couldn't win a game. They couldn't win series. So yeah. And then we'll go on to top, who finished second. Wayward is so promising for the future. I mean, he's actually so good. Tian. He's Tian. He literally looks like a god, and then he does something, and you just think, why the hell does he look like a god and then do this? Like, it's so inconsistent. Knight is amazing. Jackie Love. Oh, I really hate watching Jackie Love. He's like absolutely goated for 5 minutes, and then, well, no, he's goated for like most of the game, but he gets caught out in the dumbest ways sometimes. Like, if I had to give him like a title, it'd be the Wild Turtle of China. And no, don't get me wrong, he is much, 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 much better than Wild Turtle. But like, Wild Turtle is known for getting caught out by literally any skill shot. Jackie Love, in a best of 5 series, there will be a game that is lost by Jackie Love getting caught out. 100%. Mark, yeah, he's cool, but he's definitely the worst player on that team, in my opinion. RNG. The Gala Bin show. It's like, okay, actually that's unfair, because Xiaohu and Ming do actually have some really sick games. Gala and Ming are like the best bot duo in like China, in my opinion. Xiaohu is insane at times. Wei loves to in early games, and Bin is incredibly inconsistent. We will like talk about certain things, like how they're going to do at MSI once we've gone through the other two regions that are in Pool 1. But particularly if we want to talk about, we'll particularly talk about the final against Top. Honestly, so RNG won the opening 2 games. In my opinion, RNG did not win those games so much as Top lost it. Like, Top had this amazing start. They had big gold leads, big like objective leads in general, like towers, drakes, etc. And then they would just throw it. They just couldn't play mid-late game, and then RNG outscaled them and they would win. So yeah, they did win their. I feel like they did win their last game. I feel like the last game you can say they won. Maybe I'm thinking that wrong, because now I think they might have just won it in like a slightly. Don't know. We'll say Top lost the series. Although I think that might be good in terms of China's chances at MSI. Next we'll go to Korea and T1. Oh my god, T1. Their season. Anyway, so we'll start with Han Life. Yeah. Actually, we'll just get rid of all the rosters. We'll go back to just having one roster. Hanwha Life. I mean, Dudu's fine. I didn't watch too many games because I sort of saw this roster and was like, what do you expect to do with it? Like, I just... Like, to me, okay, the names that stand out, Dudu. Han was academy player. Like, okay, okay, that's unfair. He's pretty good, but he's not. On fleek, he played for Sandbox as their sub. Like, he wasn't good enough to play for... This is no, like, diss to the players. It's just I didn't see this team ever getting anywhere. Like, Sam D was the player that stood out most to me, so, like, you're not going anywhere. You bought him from Thunder Talk Gaming. Like, this team is, in my opinion, the worst team to buy from in China. They never do anything. And Sam D was an insane player, but he's not going to carry your org. He's not going to absolutely carry your org to just endless wins. Sandbox, I don't really remember Sandbox at all. I have to say, Korea, I've sort of forgotten about it because it ended so early. Yeah, I didn't really watch much Sandbox actually. I rate their team though. I do I like Croco anyway. I was saying their team, and then I saw the rest of the players, and I sort of realised I don't maybe like them that much. But anyway, Nongshim. I mean, this is what happens when you get rid of a really good player in Gory and replace him with a player that is washed up, maybe, and Ghost washed up, maybe. Effort not as good as he used to be. Kana was never really the strongest. Well, I felt like he was always one of the weak links when he was on T1. KT roster, they couldn't get a... They had a decent... Like, this is a decent team. Like, Rascal, Kurs, Aiming Life is, like, a pretty decent team in my mind. And then they had Aria originally from DFM. And I thought it was a bit of a weird one. I was really happy for him because, like, that's big. It was big for, like, Japan as a region. It was big for, like, him. It was a step up, going from being easily the best player in Japan, easily one of the best mid laners in Japan, doing well internationally for Japan, to moving to Korea, and then he got benched. He just didn't work for them at all. So they replaced him with Vikla, and Vikla was actually sick. Like, he was genuinely, when he came in, he did so well. Should go for Frederick Bryan. Frederick Bryan, I love, like, as an org. This team massively overperformed in my opinion. Morgan is not a good top laner in Korea. Like, don't get me wrong, when I'm talking about these top regions and I say they're not good, what I mean is, like, they're not going to win. You know, they're never going to win you a series. They're never going to win you a best of 5 series in the playoffs of your region, which is, like, the Korea. Obviously, this gets, like, this gets weaker as you go down the strength of the region. So you can judge sort of based off my opinion of the regions as to what that really means about them. Morgan Sword, never going to win you a playoff in your region. I don't think either of these two are good investments if you ever want to win. Although Morgan has had some good series, and Sword has had some good series, to be fair. He had some really nice pop-off games. He really did. Lava had some decent pop-off games. Henna had some decent pop-off games. Delight had some decent pop-off games. But they all had inting phases. They also all had games where they were just purely outclassed by their opponents. It was like, sometimes you felt sorry for them because they just got so heavily outclassed by the good teams, and then other times it was like, oh my god, they're actually competing with this team that should be massively outclassing them, and that was nice. Kwangdong, I mean, you got Keen still here. Keen, I love him. You got Alin, Teddy Hoyt. It's a team. I don't think it's ever going to win you a championship, but it's going to be good by the Afrika Freak standards. And yes, I'm going to keep calling them Afrika Freaks because they're still owned by Afrika, even if they're sponsored by Kongdog. But I think they did well. They had to say it was a keen team. Teddy looked decent. He had some very good games without the T1 pressure. Hoyt looked a bit. It had some nice individual bits. I think Elim and Hoyt maybe sometimes didn't fit with the team, like relative to other jungle support duos, and relative to the class of their own players. But they did well. I rated them. DRX, yeah. I mean, I really wanted Deft. To finish third. I am a big Deft fan. Same with Beryl. I wanted Beryl to do well. But they have lots of pieces again. And I think maybe you can expect to see them to do something big in the summer. Let's quickly go to playoffs, even though I've addressed some of the teams. I completely forgot Kwangdong actually beat DRX. That was crazy. Because I watched that game, and not gonna lie, like, for those that remember at the time, NS was doing videos about how T1 would choose to play Damwon in the next round if no matter who won. Well, I think he was basically assuming that DRX and Damwon would win quite comfortably, and he said like he was making all these videos about how T1 would choose Damwon, and I genuinely think they would have chosen Damwon had DRX won. I think DRX with Keen, Pyoshik, Zika, Deft, and Beryl had this potential upset like factor, because if the pieces all came together, they were a really, really, really strong team. But as soon as Kwangdong Tweaks won, it was over. Like, they were automatically going to choose KDF. Yeah, T1 looked pretty decent against Kwangdong. Wait, no, we'll not skip to winners. Damwon, yeah, they did what they were supposed to do, and I think their Nuggery edition that they've got will make up for a lot of their problems, because Jokdam had some really good series, Kalian had some decent, I've butchered both their names, have some decent series. Like their bot side was strong, despite the fact that I didn't have particularly high expectations for it coming into the season, despite knowing that they were pretty decent. Like, I expected them to be substantially weaker than Genji, DRX, and T1 spot lanes, and they weren't. They were actually pretty good. Showmaker is Showmaker, although maybe I'm thinking too much relatively, like relative to other players. But I think Showmaker maybe had a relatively weaker split compared with last year in general. Canyon is just Canyon. He's an actual legend. He makes other people's jungles his own. And then Hoya Birdle were definitely the weakness of the team, but you sort of expect that. You definitely expected it coming into this season. Genji. My man, Lehens. I am actually in love. He makes Yumi look like a seriously mechanical champion, and in a good way. Like, Lehens on Yumi, oh my god, it is beautiful. Ruler, like, this team is sick. I think there are a couple of games where you can say Dora and Peanuts sort of let the team down. And I will like do some proper breaking down, maybe mid-season. The reason why I'm not doing any breakdown properly now is because this is just meant to be a quick sum up post-season. But I felt like they had some really good games where they just didn't properly utilise certain pieces of their team. T1. This team looks sick. They looked really, really good regular season. They looked really good against Kwangdong. And then they massively underperformed against Genji. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a good series. But you just felt like it was more T1 not turning up than Genji turning up that made it a 3-1. So yeah, let's get on to everyone's favourite region, Europe. For those that don't know, I'm from Europe, but I'm a massively pessimistic European fan. Astralis looked like Astralis. Astralis are just absolute dog doo-doo. The replacement of White Knight with Chachi, Visa Chachi, is not going to do anything. Like, I think they had the worst top laner, worst jungler, worst support, and then Kobe is probably like 8th, 9th AD carry. Dior sometimes was half decent, but he's still just a worse version. He's just like a worse Niski. He's a worse whatever. And as a supported mid laner, he's alright. Like, he's just alright. He actually looked better in LEC than he did in EU Masters last year, which I guess is a good thing for him. But yeah, it was a bit weird. BDS, I feel so sorry for Grabs. Grabs coached this team to get so many good early advantages, and they kept throwing them away. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. They look like an EU Masters team. And what do I mean by that? Is sort of like they look inexperienced. They make stupid decisions based off the fact that they think they can outplay their opponents, which is a very common thing in EU Masters. Because for those that don't watch EU Masters, it's sort of this thing where it's sort of the way it tends to be is that, especially in the early games of the EU Masters, the stronger region teams, which all these players are from, well, apart from Limit maybe, although Limit mostly played in major regions after, once he left Ad Hoc, he's been around. Okay, he did actually. Okay, he's not in EU Masters teams, but he's been around. So maybe I don't know. I don't know why Limit would play like that, but maybe it's just the influence of the rest of the players. But these four have all been from the major regions within EU Masters, by which I mean France, Spain, Germany, what would now be the UK Nordics, Poland. And they were obviously all on Carmine Core, who just destroyed everyone in EU Masters. And what happens early on in EU Masters is the big region teams just go, we can destroy you in terms of strats, we can destroy you in terms of mechanics, we're just so much better than you at the game, we don't need to take it seriously. Yeah, they are taking it seriously, but they don't think everything through as much. They play with a bit more of an arrogance. And that's sort of what I felt like BDS sometimes did. Not fully consciously, but they did it, and they lost so many games as a result. SK, I think they overperformed. I think Treats is still a really, really good support. I think the rest of the team is pretty average. I think they wouldn't look out of place in EU Masters, but I think they do well at EU Masters, so I don't think there's an issue with them. I think, unlike Astralis, who I think would actually do pretty poorly at EU Masters, BDS I think would do pretty decently, just for context. I think they do alright. Mad Lions. They're getting rid of Rika. They were such a flaw. They were a good team, and you can tell that they just barely missed out on playoffs. But they were so flawed. If you think about that being Rika, Unforgiven, Kaiser's ability to sync with the rest of his team wasn't as good as usual. El Yoya didn't look as clean, even though there's now rumours about him going to Fnatic, which I think are crazy, because I don't think he had as good a split as most people are saying. Armut didn't play as well as he did last year. It was just a whole sort of mess, honestly. I guess we'll go to playoffs. So, I guess we'll start with the XL Vitality. XL. I mean, honestly, ignoring the coaching staff, you do not expect this team to do anything in Europe. Mickey, he's done stuff, but he needs things around him to actually do anything. Patrick, he was being memed on in 2020 for being not good enough, and he's still not good enough to win anything. Nuke Duck, he's pretty decent, but I don't see him ever winning anything individually. Marcoon is Marcoon. He's solid, but he still has fundamental errors that are just not going to win your team a championship. And Finn, he's looking so much better now he's back in Europe than when he did in NA. But there's still moments where that ability from NA comes back, and it's just not good. But I think give him another split, and he might be even better, maybe. We'll do Vitality. This team is never going to do it. Is never going to win a championship. This core three, Alphari, Selfmade, Perks, is never going to win a championship. And I'm not going to suggest anything about I am going to suggest anything about the players, but it's not legit. I think this is exactly how they are. It's speculation, but based off certain things we've seen. We've seen that Alphari doesn't like to compromise necessarily on his TL days. Selfmade, he loves to have his own way, as we've seen from his Fnatic days in the first year of Vitality. Perks, he likes to compromise, but he's not going to keep compromising. He has a point where he stops, and I think that's fine. But those three are never going to work. because Perks will compromise to a point, and then he won't. Selfmade doesn't like to compromise. Alfari doesn't like to compromise. Those three are never going to work in a team, because as a jungler, how do you prioritize if Alfari and Perks have different ideas? If you're Perks, how are you going to mid lane properly if your top and jungle are completely out of sorts with each other and don't understand how to play around each other because they have different ideas, they aren't willing to compromise? And then Kazi and Labrov. Kazi's cool, he's a good player, but I feel like both of them just feel outclassed, and they can't keep. I don't think either of them are going to keep up with the shouting match that these three could produce. Maybe you did need a different coach. Maybe with a different coach it would be possible if they could control the egos of particularly Alfari Selfmade. Bear in mind, I am an Alfari and Selfmade fan. I just like to point that out. I am a fan of these three players, and I am still saying this about them. So yeah, I don't think they'll do much. Misfits, replace Hero. Let's literally replace Hero and maybe find a better support. Mercer's good, don't get me wrong. I just don't think he's going to win anything. But if you replace Hero, I think you have a chance at winning Summer. I think you genuinely have a chance. Zlatan is great as a jungler. VTO was insane in the regular split season. Didn't perform as well in playoffs, but then really, as a rookie, are you going to perform well when you're playing the best team in the region, undisputably, at that point? And then you play G2, who just had momentum. Your team didn't have momentum. Your team was probably feeling like shit. You had other players inting around you. Like, yeah, I just think expecting VTO to perform in these two series is a bit unfair. But I think this team could genuinely compete next split for the championship. Fnatic next. Razork didn't perform that well. He didn't sync well with the rest of his team. Humanoid was continually running it down on TF in playoffs. The team couldn't adapt against Rogue. Wonder still wasn't quite to what he was before the Reckless year. Yeah, it's cool. They've got the pieces. If they can get Humanoid playing again, get Razork again, they have potential. Like I think you can keep that team and still win a championship. I think that team can still win if they can get themselves sorted out. Rogue, Odo is a beast. Larson is a beast. Malrang is a beast if you don't know how to play against him, but otherwise you can totally see why he was never going to be the starting jungler for Damwon. Trimby is Trimby, so he has some really good games and some less good games. Comp is Comp, so he has some really good games and some less good games. Honestly, I expected them to beat G2 quite comfortably. Not based off this series. Like, I felt like this series was poor from both Rogue and Fnatic, and I kind of expected them both to get it out of their systems for these games. But I still expected G2 to beat Fnatic, because I didn't expect Humanoid to shake out his issues, but I expected Rogue to sort of shake out their issues, but I think they're just not... They're not very adaptable, and I think that sort of caused them an issue. And then we'll go to G2. They have a lot of issues that are made up by innate talent and their ability to play together, and their willingness to listen to each other. And I don't think they've been tested. I think Rogue were pretty poor in this series. I think Fnatic were pretty poor in this series. I think Vitality were pretty poor. Misfits, and when I say poor, I mean by poor by their standards. I think Misfits you can give a pass to. I think Misfits, here it was poor, but I think the overall team was less bad relative than Fnatic, Rogue, and Vitality. But yeah. So if you go back to MSI, if you were to rate these three teams and their chances, oh my. It's painful as a Western fan. This is actually painful. Because these teams, you've got T1, relatively untested, but they're untested in a region where you can say that Chovy is on a team that didn't look like they were going to compete. They're in a region where Defter didn't look like he was going to compete. Like, my god, Gumagod, Baker, like, oh no, like I had this rule, right? When I think about drafting, I have this rule that I don't I don't want anyone playing, like, in general, a stereotype, I don't want anyone playing Lee Sin who isn't Chinese when he's not actually good. Like, so at the moment, for example, I don't want anyone who's not Chinese, not a Chinese jungler in the LPL, playing Lee Sin. I'd let Ona play Lee Sin. I would let Ona play Lee Sin. So that tells you what I think about their team. But I think they are flawed. I think they won a lot of games based on their ability to win games rather than their, like, innate ability to play League of Legends. By which I mean, they didn't play cleanly, they didn't play better than their opponents necessarily. Their opponents sort of made mistakes which they capitalised on after they made their own mistakes which weren't necessarily capitalised on. RNG... it's hard to say. They sort of did a lot of what T1 did to a lesser ability. You can say it about all three teams actually. They all had the ability to come back from deficits, but they weren't necessarily the cleanest players. They weren't necessarily the best teams in their region. If I had to say a team that I favoured out of the three right now, probably T1 because they did it against better teams that were playing better than either of these other two teams. I think RNG are probably better than G2 for the similar sort of reason. I also think Gala, Ming, Bin, Xiaohu is a bigger factor than BB, Yankos, Caps, Flakkid. I don't know, those aren't role for role, but like if we look at these teams, right, and we go, what's the flaw with these teams? If we had to pick 4 players and we go, flaw with this team, like Wei, like if we go carry for like how these team like stacks up, they're best players, like they're standout players that win them games, right? RNG, any of their players can win, but I think like Wei's the only one that doesn't regularly, and I think he also runs it down occasionally for them. T1, Carrier maybe doesn't win it occasionally, like is like their weak point, but he's still really really good. Like, maybe I'm biased, but Targmas, maybe Ian Yankos is the one that doesn't win. But like they all, like G2 all have good games, but like when I'm trying to compare them with T1, like okay, I'm going to do a quick tier list for like each role position. Zeus, this is based off this spring split, by the way, not overall. If I had to do it overall, I go Bin, Zeus, BB. Zeus, and then I think the other two are equal because they've both had good games and bad games. Ona, Yankos, Wei, Faker, Xiaohu, Caps, Gumagod, Gala, Flakkid, Ming, Carrier, Targmas. Like, you heard how many times I had G2's players at the end. Like, individually on players, individually, like, in terms of team ability, in terms of, like, coordination, I think Europe are the weakest out of these three.